What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here to do something very similar to what we did yesterday with our first video of the day, and that was updating the Detroit Lions salary cap situation. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we are back to take a look at the Lions salary cap situation. I got my phone here because news is just happening left and right. And this morning, the Detroit Lions reportedly restructured a contract. So I think this is a video that we can do for the next few days, just kind of update the Lions salary cap as we continue to get details leaked on certain contracts that we have given out, because at this time there's multiple players that we don't know the details of their contract as of the time I'm recording this. You may know by the time you're watching this, but there's still multiple players that I don't know of their details of their contract. And if we don't know that, we can't really anticipate where the salary cap for the team is, because really all that's going to matter towards that is what is their cap hit for the season, if you're talking how much cap space we have right now. And because there's multiple players that we don't know the exact number of cap space that we have. The Lions do, but we don't. However, there were some updates on certain contracts that we've already given out, so we can go through those and update those, take a look at how the Lions structured a couple of their deals. And also on top of that, the restructure that the Lions made this morning, I think is something that, it's worth making into a video. So I was like, let's just tie it all together. Let's update what we know so far and talk about this restructure. Even though, again, it doesn't seem like we have all the details on how this restructure is happening. Opened up some cap space, reportedly roughly $2.8 million. It was a specific amount, but it was basically in that range. So let's start right there. Now, we're going to be bouncing back and forth between Spot Trek or Spotrek and over the cap as well. Now, as you can see here, the Lions salary cap space is set at $22.15 million according to over the cap. But again, as you'll see as we go through this, there are multiple players that are missing in terms of what their actual cap hit is. So we don't know how much cap space the Lions actually have right now. However, starting with Charles Harris, we do know this. So if we look at the 2023 season, and if you go to Spotrek, they have not updated or moved his contract at all. So this was his original contract with the Lions. It was a 2-year deal. He had a void year on the contract. His cap space for his cap hit for the season was almost $8 million. But again, there was that void year, which was just for salary cap purposes. What we know now is that this has been lowered according to over the cap. They gave us an exact number, and it actually checks out based on how much reportedly the Lions saved, to just over $5 million. If we see right here, $5.164 million now is his cap hit for the season. So it's about $2.8 million in cap space that we freed. Now, while we don't know the exact details on how the Lions did that, what we can assume is, again, they took from that $6 million base salary, turned it into signing bonus, as it's divided evenly, as we know, to the deals on your contract. That would also go into his void year. So he would have a more expensive, basically dead cap, more expensive void year next season. That's basically what we understand the Lions likely did with this contract. Maybe they even threw another void year on it to spread it out even further. But again, regardless of whether or not you throw that an extra void year on there, if he's not re-signed, it's going to accelerate anyway. So biggest thing there is that the Lions did open up cap space, roughly $2.8 million, which is weirdly similar to the cap hit that we have for David Montgomery this season. We do know that. We just don't know all the details on the Charles Harris situation. What else do we know? So we know about David Montgomery's contract as well. This one has been reported the details, and you can see he is under contract, as we know, 3 years, $18 million. However, again, the Lions placed a void year on his contract, which, again, if you don't know, a void year just basically means it's something that you throw onto the contract in the books. It's just for salary cap purposes. It doesn't mean that he's actually under contract. Like, if you just leave it as void year and you don't re-sign him after 2025, he's not going to be on your team. However, you are paying that $1.125 million technically that season. If you have multiple void years and you don't re-sign him, those just accelerate into that after the last year that he is actually under contract playing for you. So then they'll all kind of add together. The reason you add a void year is because you can spread out bonus. Prorated bonus is spread out evenly throughout the amount of years on your contract. So, for example, if I only have 3 years on his contract, then that's going to spread out divided by 3. However, if I have 5 years on his contract, because I put 2 void years on there, now it's going to spread out evenly between the 5 years. So every year that signing bonus is actually a little bit less, until, of course, he's not under contract, then it accelerates and you get it that season. You feel it that season. So something that the Lions have been doing with a lot of these signings is backloading, or not just backloading like they did here, but also adding a void year, and that's what they did once again. So as you can see, his cap number for the season is only $2.8 million. His bonus, which was $4.5 million, has been spread out now between 4 seasons because, again, the void year that they decided to throw on there. Now, it was backloaded a little bit, as you can see, to 6.875 in 2024 and over $7 million in 2025. But what's really important here is that there is an out after the 2024 season. You would save $4.8 million with a cut after 2024 and only have $2.25 million in dead cap after 2024. So likely he's going to be locked up for the next 2 years because you're not really saving anything if you cut him. I mean, you could, but you're not really saving anything. He has an out after 2 seasons, which again is the way the Lions have set a lot of these contracts. So even though this is the highest number, also expect the salary cap to continue to rise. But then on top of that, there's also an out within his contract. So that's the case right here. That's how the Lions set it up, but only $2.8 million cap hit for this year. Very low. Very low. Now, who else do we know about? Reynolds is still a weird one because, again, we thought he was an exclusive rights free agent. Then it was like, no, he's not an exclusive rights free agent. Well, here's what we know. Okay, according to Over the Cap, his cap number is $940K. That's what we know according to Over the Cap. Now, this may not be accurate, but that's what we know. And there is also no dead money if he's cut, which, while it may not technically be an exclusive rights deal, that's basically what an exclusive rights deal is going to look like, right? It's basically the minimum with no guarantees in his contract. So that's kind of what it seems to be, even though I don't know if you would put it in that category exactly. It looks exactly like exclusive rights deal. So there you go. That's what it looks like. It looks like an exclusive rights deal to me, but the point is, it's a very low cap hit. It's near the minimum, and if you cut him, there would be no dead cap there from what we know according to Over the Cap. But it is a nice update to have. Those are the contracts that we now know of for the Detroit Lions. I could be missing some, but I don't think I am here. So when you go back to the Lions salary cap calculator according to Over the Cap, who do we not know about? Who do we not have details on? Well, you can see it on the right here. First off, Alex Anzalone. It was reported that he signed a 3-year, $18.75 million deal, but we don't know the deal details on his contract yet. So again, we cannot affect the cap space because we don't know what his cap hit is for this year. Based on what we've done, a lot of these are probably backloaded. There's probably an out within his deal. 3-year deals. A lot of times Lions like to leave an out 2 years into that deal. We did the same thing I did with Cameron Sutton, leaving an out 2 years into the deal. Probably something they did here with Alex Anzalone as well. Also considering his age, after 2 years, there's an out in his deal. You can keep him or you don't have to, but that's what the Lions have done with a lot of these. So we don't know about his. We also don't know about John Kaminsky's, who again reportedly signed yesterday to a 2-year, $8.5 million deal, which would be $4.25 million each season. But again, I would assume that the cap hit is lower this year. We'll see on that one. Not a huge deal, but again, we just don't have the details on that contract. And that's just one of those deals that we don't have the details to. Emmanuel Moseley is another guy we don't have the details to. Emmanuel Moseley, as it was reported, he signed a 1-year, $6 million prove-it deal with the Lions. Now, what's important about this is if you remember back to DJ Chark, it was reported that he signed a 1-year, $10 million deal, but his cap hit was nowhere near $10 million. It was like half of that, and then there was a void year. Actually, there was 2 void years on his deal that was over $4 million. So the Lions last season did something potentially similar to what they could do with Emmanuel Moseley as well. We just don't know his contract. And then finally, we also don't know about Matt Nelson's contract either. I would assume it's very low because he was a restricted free agent. The Lions didn't place a tender on him. I would assume his cap hit is very low, maybe around $1 million. I would assume it's pretty darn low, however, and again, it's probably just a 1-year deal from what we assume here. So that's another guy we don't know his cap number, so we can't add that. And then finally, I would say Will Harris, even though, again, I don't think it's officially been reported that he's actually signing with the Lions, but I've heard that the Lions were going to bring him back. I don't really know on that one. I like Will Harris. You guys know I would bring him back. I'm a fan of the guy. Versatility. I love how he plays in the back end. I'm a really big fan of Will Harris, and I think he really improved at the cornerback position, and I would like to see him continue to get work there and kind of try to work in a role, right? Figure out, okay, this is actually what I'm good at. So for me, I would like to bring back Will Harris. Again, the contract probably wouldn't be super expensive there. But with that being said, even if he was re-signed, we don't know the details as of now. But I think that's because that one's not technically official right now. One little quick point there to the Will Harris thing that I just said. I would assume that if Lions do re-sign Will Harris, it'll be a 1-year deal, but also they'll have an out within that deal. That way, for numbers' sake, I think they're still going to draft a cornerback relatively high. So if the numbers don't work out and they have to cut a guy like that, I would assume they're going to want it out in his deal and not want a whole bunch of guarantees where they're basically guaranteeing themselves dead cap if they don't want to keep that many corners. However, quick little point that I wanted to make here when you remember the top 51 rule that applies during the offseason, meaning that only the top 51 cap hits are actually going to impact the cap space. The reason I bring this up is because you also have to tie this into what you're talking about in terms of your draft picks and how they're going to impact your cap space, right? Over the Cap estimates it's $4.34 million. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the Lions are going to have to take on with their draft class. Currently, based on the Lions salary cap situation, the bottom 5 guys that they have of $870K in terms of a cap hit for 2023 would actually be higher than, I believe, their last 3 picks, as you can see here. So round 5 and round 6 are 2 draft picks they have. So it'd actually be higher than those. So those technically wouldn't count towards your cap space because of the fact that their cap hits would actually be lower than 5 guys that are currently above the top 51 cutoff. So to put this kind of in a way that you can see it, technically if we just cut them on over the cap, simulator here, technically if you just cut these guys, you would see that you would open up about $4.35 million in cap space for the Lions. Now, the guys that would count for the Detroit Lions to your top 51 would be these draft picks, right? Your first round picks, your second round picks, and your third round picks. Those guys for sure would count because their cap number would be higher than the bottom 5 within that top 51 cutoff. So that would be about 12 million, 11.9 by some quick math there. And again, these are just projections by over the cap, but let's just say $12 million. So you subtract that 12 million from the 4.35, and you're looking at about $7.5 million in cap hit that the Detroit Lions have to have open for just the draft class alone. Not necessarily the 14.3 million that they're putting out there on over the cap projections, because again, you're only counting the top 51. So you have to replace those players, if that makes sense. You have to replace those players, so it's only going to be looking at like $7.5 million roughly. So that's just something to throw out there, just to keep in mind, right? So in this situation, you'd be looking at like 19 million, because roughly 26.5 minus 7.5 is 19. After you're including, the rookies that you draft. But then again, we don't know about those players that I just brought up. So Lions do have cap space. That's the point that I'm trying to make here, is it's not the direct $14 million, because you have to replace players. And also on top of that, not every draft pick will actually count against the top 51 in terms of cap hit during the offseason, because of the fact that they're not going to be replacing players that you have signed, likely. So just a quick little update there. A lot of things can change between now and then, but just keep that in mind. So what do we do know? We know David Montgomery. We know the Lions restructured Charles Harris to open up some cap space, and we know Craig Reynolds' deal as of now, we think. Which leads us to, according to Over the Cap, looking at $22.15 million in cap space. Again, this is not something that's 100% accurate, and it's going to be a while before this is 100% accurate because of those guys that we don't know about. But there's also the side, of course, like we said, of the draft class. Also only need cap space for the top 51 in the offseason. Only the top 51 contracts will actually count against your salary cap, so you have to keep that in mind as well. But that's what we know so far. So that's what I know. Hopefully that helps. All right, there's still some things that are kind of up in the air, but the Lions know where they're at, and I'm sure, I said this yesterday, I didn't think we were going to make a lot of big deals. Lions actually made some moves yesterday. See some re-signings potentially going down, maybe a couple of prove-it deals. But with that being said, we still do have a few needs, specifically a kicker. We don't actually have a kicker under contract. Lions could address that in the draft, but we don't have a kicker under contract. They can wait. There's certain positions. We may do a live stream on this. Point being, though, that's where the Lions are at salary cap-wise. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching. And I'm out.